Buckle your seatbelts, toots. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. Clair Obscur, the wild 6-year development cycle.
This is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, just 1 year into development. This footage you're seeing was made with the sole purpose of trying to find voice actors for the main characters. In fact, the creator of the game would literally be posting this to Reddit in order to find voice actors for their characters. And from that same Reddit post, the creator would also find a lead writer, of which also had no experience in working in games before. In fact, her previous role was an investor at a private equity company. To top it off, the composer for the game's soundtrack had never written a game soundtrack before, and he was brought on after the director of the game found him off of SoundCloud. And to put this into perspective, most AAA games like Fortnite or Call of Duty are backed by hundreds of developers across dozens of different departments. So this begs the question, how did a team that's smaller than the Call of Duty microtransaction department craft the most visually incredible and most impactful RPG we've seen in years?
It's a legitimate question. How did this even happen? How does this even exist? By everything that we think we know about video games, it shouldn't exist at all. That's amazing. It shows you the real power. It shows you the true power of real passion, of real creativity. It's something that money can't buy. It's funny because I imagine that, I don't know, at the top, I don't know how things run. It's all about like measured in numbers. You know, how much money can this make? How much is that thing worth? This and that. But art doesn't really play by those rules. You know, art's worth, it can't really be quantified. Real art, true art, its worth can't be quantified in money or numbers or charts or anything. It operates on a different level. It's kind of its own thing, and I think this game shows that. From concept to classic, beautiful environment. This is still my favorite environment in the whole game.
Expedition 33's journey began in late 2020, but the first concepts actually started 4 years before that. Guillaume Broche, who was the founder of Sandbox Interactive and the director of Expedition 33, was at Ubisoft for roughly 4 years. From 2016 up until 2019, he would work on games like The Division 2 and Ghost Recon Breakpoint. After those two games shipped, he was put in a narrative lead role for a game franchise called Might and Magic. And like many of you right now, I had no idea this game franchise even existed. But apparently, the franchise is a mobile game owned by Ubisoft.
I've known about Might and Magic when it was a very old computer game. That's how old I am. From like the late 90s, I think. Yeah. Oh my god. Anyway, sorry, let's continue.
Shanghai, and Broche was leading the narrative for this franchise. And as you would expect from leading narrative on a mobile game designed to extract as much money as possible from players, Guillaume got bored with the work that he was doing on the team and really felt like there was no impact to what he was doing. And during this time, he had ambitions that went beyond being shoehorned into a mobile gacha game. He knew that a game like Expedition 33 would never be greenlit by Ubisoft, so he quit his job in order to pursue his ambition. Alongside him, Tom Guillerme had the same ambitions as the director, so he would also leave Ubisoft and join the infant team. With the director writing up the narrative and Tom, who had expertise on how Unreal Engine worked, the small grassroots team would begin by exploring Unreal Engine 4. While the director was messing around with Unreal Engine, the original prototype for Clair Obscur was supposed to be related to time. So when he had to save the project on his computer, he had to find a name for the project file. So what would the project be called? Well, the game's related to time, so maybe Hourglass. Well, Sandfall in an hourglass. Okay. Sandfall is the working name of the game, and from that point on, the game's internal working name would be Sandfall, even to this day.
Alright.
With Tom at the helm as co-founder.
That's cool, I didn't know that story behind the name of their company. That's sick.
and CTO, and Guillaume as CEO and also a co-founder. They would embark on their expedition to create a brand new world by themselves.
You know what? Even at its bare bones, it still looks kind of mad. It still looks pretty cool.
Create a brand new world
Like, I'm
by themselves.
kind of intrigued. All right, let's keep going. Oh, God.
Now that the studio had been founded, it was time to actually build up the game. Since Guillaume wanted this game to have a big focus on narrative, he began reaching out anywhere he could to find people who would be interested in helping the passion project evolve into something a bit more serious. He created this post on the subreddit r/record this for free, looking to cast actors for the main roles of the game, including, of course, Maelle. One of the many people who auditioned from this Reddit post was Jennifer Svedberg. She got one of the leading roles as an actor. However, once she joined the team, it was pretty clear that her impact would be most noticed in a writer position, so she became lead writer on the game.
How did they figure that out? How'd they think of that? I still want to know, where's that moment where you've got an actor, you've got an actress, and then you're like, wait a minute. This person's a bloody literary genius. You know what? We need you as the writer instead. Like, I still don't know where that missing piece is. And if anyone knows, please tell me. All right, let's keep going.
Despite the growing teams, the co-founders and Jennifer Yen said that they wore many different hats during the game's production. Her involvement would span from story to gameplay to art and all over the project. At this point, the small team continued prototyping and development on the game, but the team started the hunt for a composer at the same time. The co-founders began their hunt for a composer by reaching out to the most popular composers in the industry, like Hans Zimmer, Johnny Paisano, Danny Elfman, and... just kidding. He began his search on SoundCloud. That's where he found Lorien Testard. And at this point, Lorien had never worked on a game before, but caught the attention of the co-founders based off the work he's done on his SoundCloud. I am not making this up. The composer of Expedition 33, one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a video game, had never worked on a video game soundtrack before.
This is what blows my mind. Like, again, like, there's so much music out there. There's so many people making so much music. How do you eventually find that? How do you get through all of it to eventually find him? I don't know.
Oh, and actually, it wasn't SoundCloud. It was even crazier than that.
Oh,
One night, the director went on an obscure gaming forum with like 10 people on it, and he made a post asking if anybody would want to join his team as a composer. And out of sheer luck, Lorien Testard had also randomly found this forum for the first time, just an hour after the post was made. The hunt to expand the team wouldn't end just there. They would also find the studio's art director too. Nicholas Maxence would join the studio during the founders' hunt through online forums. The core development team of 6 developers would continue.
It's weird because I like to think I'm somewhat scientifically minded and very well, actually. But then when insane levels, inhuman levels of universal RNG happen like that, I don't know. I don't know. Then again, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. And the more you look at, like, you know, the universe itself, the more you're like, wow, Earth is definitely flat. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
To work on the prototype for Expedition 33. Driven by a cohesive vision of what they wanted the game to be from the very beginning, the teams spent the majority of 2020 building out the studio first, and then towards the end of the year, the game itself. Everyone was on the same page here, and had the same goals as each other, to make one of the best reimaginings of a classic JRPG that anybody will ever play.
And they weren't wrong. They set out to do that, and that's exactly what they did. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 feels like it's literally from an alternate timeline where Final Fantasy kept evolving along the lines of 7, 8, 9, 10, and just kept going down that way instead of, well, you know, what we got. But yes, no, it's crazy. It feels like it shouldn't even be from this world. I know that sounds nuts, but like anyone who's been a Final Fantasy fan for the last 20 years and has been, well, gaslit for 2 decades straight about how such a game could never happen, no one's ever gonna want it, and you're wrong, and in fact you're a terrible person for even wanting such a thing, and how dare you, and you're fat and you're ugly and you're stupid and you smell bad. The fact that this game exists at all to someone who lived through the PS1 days of Final Fantasy, it's insane, it's nuts. I remember when I saw this in trailers for the first time, I'm like, I can't believe they're actually doing it. I can't believe someone's actually even attempting this.
By April 2021, Sandfall moved into a bigger office, and the core development team working on Expedition 33 started to expand. The team went from 6 employees to now more than 15 working on the game, comprising mostly of junior-level engineers who didn't really have any experience in making games before, but were just as ambitious as the rest of the studio. The once grassroots passion project was starting to evolve into something bigger. By mid-2021, they were putting the finishing touches on a newer, rebooted demo, something small, but was polished enough to attract attention. The original version of Expedition 33 was more Victorian, but these were all assets comprised of the Unreal Engine asset store.
Interesting.
Just as a quick way to rapidly...
You'll never see that in the OG game, or in the game that we got. You know, spunky ladies, all covered in neon. Right, let's keep going.
Comprised of the Unreal Engine asset store, just as a quick way to rapidly create a simple prototype. But as the studio's new art director joined, they shifted directions a bit.
This is a very different look for this character than what we got.
The demo was meant to serve as a teaser for potential investors or as a foundation for a future Kickstarter campaign. In less than a year since forming the studio, the team began presenting their work to various publishers. Though still in a prototype phase, the demo was impressive, especially given the team's limited size and resources. Towards the end of 2021, they would meet with a brand new publisher, Kepler Interactive. And for those who don't know Kepler Interactive, they are a small indie publisher founded in September.
They did Sifu. Oh, that's sick.
Of 2021. Kepler Interactive is co-owned by a group of independent game developers, and their primary initiative
They're based in
is to
Singapore
help fund
too?
smaller indie games like Sifu, for example, and allow teams to have...
I need to play this game. This game looks sick. Would this be a fun game to stream, Sifu?
full creative freedom over their projects. Right off the bat, the publisher and the development teams hit it off and quickly inked a deal to work together in order to ship Expedition 33. Sandfall would use the extra funding rounds by Kepler to shift development from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. Additionally, Kepler would also open the door for more popular voice actors to be brought onto the project. And of course, the small team of 12 people would...
I love how they just, of all the shots to show of Ben Starr, they love this one.
Onto the project.
Alright, where is it?
Popular voice actors to be brought on to the project.
I've seen this in like 3 different documentaries about this now. It's so good. It's so good.
And of course, the small team of 12 people would grow to 22 people working on Expedition 33. Kepler Interactive and Sandfall would announce their partnership together in March of 2023. Additionally, around the same time, Microsoft would also pick up Expedition 33 as a Day 1 Game Pass launch title. At this point, the game had financial backing, guaranteed exposure through Game Pass, successfully switched over to Unreal Engine 5, and greatly expanded their tiny development team, all within a year or two, while also simultaneously working on the actual game. With their new investments coming in, they were also able to upgrade their office with a full motion capture studio. And Kepler Interactive helped pull in a star-studded cast to help voice the main characters. The cast that Kepler was able to pull in is a bit wild. Gustave was played by none other than Charlie Cox, who you may know as Daredevil. Jennifer English played Maelle, who was Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3. Ben Starr played Verso, and he was also in Final Fantasy 16. Andy Serkis from, well, you know who he is. And the list just goes on
We
and
all
on
know
with
him.
even more incredible talent. The game was becoming something much bigger than just a great game with excellent gameplay. It was also shaping up to become an incredible narrative experience that arguably could be up there with the best movies of all time. As a side note,
Name one movie this year that is more hype than this. That's right, you can't.
on the movie side, Kepler Interactive was also able to secure a live-action film for the franchise too. It's too early to say how good that will be, but it is a fun fact. By the end of 2023, Sandfall Interactive would begin working on a debut trailer for Expedition 33. Since they had a partnership with Microsoft and were going to ship the game day one on Game Pass, they also had a spot in the
Sonic 3, that was like, that's like last year. Anyway, sorry. Let's go.
Xbox Game Showcase in 2024. This is where they chose to reveal their passion project turned masterpiece.
I remember everyone telling me, Seb, you have to watch the trailer for this game from Xbox Showcase. I can't even believe it exists at all. It's like, okay, cool world, but the combat, that was when I was like, oh, shit.
Sandfall Interactive would reveal the game to the world in June of 2024. And right off the bat, everybody was enthralled by the world that Sandfall had introduced us to. Typically, when a game spends 6 years in development, we would consider it to be stuck in development hell, or a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. However, with Sandfall Interactive and Expedition 33, a 6-year development cycle is actually a pretty remarkable turnaround. I know it sounds a bit crazy to say.
Oh, and for anyone who's saying, like, why...
Developments?
For anyone who's saying how could anyone possibly be excited by this when, you know, this type of combat has existed in Persona, Octopath Traveler, Bravely Default, so and so forth. Yes, there have been, 500 turn-based games in anime, pixel, low polygon 3D style. You are correct about that. This is done in realistic AAA 3D, and believe it or not, this is going to blow your mind. That has a different appeal. It has a more mainstream appeal. It has a broader appeal than that. Okay. Now, if you look at anime and you look at realistic 3D and your brain says it's the same picture, you're wrong. You know, they sell a lot. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're bad. Not saying they aren't. Massive niches. But this has been missing from turn-based combat since Final Fantasy X, or maybe Lost Odyssey, but that was imprisoned on the Xbox, so it literally is a Lost Odyssey, and a lot of people didn't get to play that. And as for those of you who say Final Fantasy 13 is turn-based, Final Fantasy 13 was shit. That's why no one cares.
Cycle is actually a pretty remarkable turnaround. I know it sounds a bit crazy to say, but just looking at all of the accomplishments the studio made within the development cycle really helps highlight this point. The first 2 years involved just a couple of folks playing around in Unreal Engine to get a better feel of how the engine works and creating a rapid prototype of Expedition 33. One that was a bit more Victorian and had utilized free assets from the Unreal Marketplace. The next 2 years were spent growing the team, with more talent, bringing in specialized directors, and starting the process of securing a publishing deal that would help bring the game into the limelight. And the final 2 years were spent iterating upon their prototypes and creating a game with a laser-focused vision, a vision that the entire team shared unilaterally. Not only was the team being built up during their 6-year development, but even their publisher was too. The CEO of Sandfall really hit it out of the park when he said something along the lines of, "You can accomplish so much when working with a smaller publisher team." Kepler and Sandfall both had double-digit employees, so the CEOs found it really easy to interface with each other. Alongside the fact that the studio had full creative control, the relationship between the two companies was solely dedicated to crafting the best game they possibly could, with no middlemen trying to squeeze money out of the players.
It seems like the running theme is that a smaller company is just able to pivot and adjust and you know, change course very quickly as it needs to, in a way that's probably a lot harder for a bigger company to do.
2 months later, the team would put out a 6-minute gameplay reveal. This reveal would showcase all of the work that they had done thus far during development. At this point, the gameplay they showed off looked to be almost identical to the final version we would get a couple months later, so it's safe to say the work that remained at this point was bug fixing and minor UI changes. By the end of 2024, the team had finally finished the core development of the game, and it was time to celebrate. They knew that the game would be releasing next year, and they anxiously waited fans to get their hands on their project. And to no surprise to anybody who's played Expedition 33, they absolutely crushed.
What is that? What is this 90s filter they're using, even though it says it was filmed in 2023? At the bottom. Like, do these cameras even exist anymore? So yeah, anyway, let's go. It's
and
cool though.
No surprise
cool
to
vibe.
Anybody who's played Expedition 33, they absolutely crushed it. Not only was it a...
Let's see that. Yep. 100 player rating. Wow. Look at that. PC Gamer, 7 out of 10. Oh wait, they're British and this game's French. Okay, fully understood. Let's continue.
Critical success with reviewers, but also gamers. Since release, the game has been in the top 10 most popular games on Steam alone. In just 12 days, the game sold over 2 million copies, and we can only imagine what the actual player count is if you factor...
Insane. 12 days, 2 million copies. And then later, you know, 30 days, however you want to go by, 33 days, 3.3 million copies. Just unbelievable.
Factor in Game Pass. The story of this game's development is just crazy. The teams absolutely deserved their flowers in creating such a great journey with such a small team. But don't just take it from me. Here's the founder of Lorien Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, predicting the success of Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
So it turns out that not only will I be the one who will know as first which game wins tonight, but I actually also know which game is going to win next year, the year after, and the year after. Now, how do I know this? Well, an oracle told me. She said, change is coming. The oracle told me that the game of the year 2025 was going to be made by a studio who found the formula to make it up here on stage. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost. Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to serve as a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear being laid off if they didn't meet those targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun. And they realized that if the developers didn't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. They understood the value of respect, that if they treated their developers and players well, those same developers and players would forgive them when things didn't go as planned.
That is such an unbelievably important point right there. When you're a player and you can sense, you can feel that the developers are on your side. They want to make the most fun, coolest thing possible for you. You forgive them if they make a mistake or two, or if sometimes they fall short. You know what I mean? That's how a lot of games in the 1990s and the early 2000s felt. Whereas now, a lot of what we get today is you play a game and it's like, the developers, it's like they know what you want, but they're like, yeah, well, we're not going to give that to you because if we do this, we might make a bit more money. Well, if they do that, then when it turns out to not be as fun, and then they pull some other bullshit, you get pissed off at them. You're like... There's a thing where people say, oh, you know, you're just looking back at rose-tinted glasses, you know. There were always bad games and mid-games back then, you just remember the good ones. True, but you're missing a really important piece of that puzzle, which is that back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there was not this weird trend that is all pervasive in the video game industry today, or like very pervasive, where it seems like devs hate their audiences and at the same time are trying the most obvious, shameless practices to try and squeeze as much money from them as possible. Those two things at once. Like, yes, have there always been, whatever, you know, games designed to eat your quarters or whatever, so on and so forth. This is not the same thing, man. This is not the same thing. This was not a problem in the 90s or the early 2000s. This game reminds a lot of players of how the video game landscape used to feel, how the culture used to feel. And I think that's why it is so effective and why it's like hit so many players all over the world. You know, it's as I said in that short, it's the best of the old and the best of the new and none of the bullshit of either.
But above all, they cared about their game because they loved games. It's really that simple, said the Oracle.
Yeah.
C'est vraiment une expérience qui a été très importante pour moi. J'ai pleuré pendant 2 jours, j'ai rigolé, c'était formidable.
Well, you bloody deserve it, mate. Because you, Lorien Testard, wrote one of the best soundtracks in video game history. Bloody good work, mate. Outstanding. Good stuff.